and then we'll go on Facebook. And I'm going to mute everybody until we start asking questions, and then you'll be able to. Then I'll tell you in a minute. Hold on. Mute. Everybody on mute.
I think you can mute us from there.
Yeah, I am muting a lot of as many as I can. There's just so many of you. I won't mute Sheila.
Don't mute me. Yeah. Now it's black with I
Okay.
can't see. Okay.
Hi there, I'm Jeannie Ralston. I'm the co-founder of Next Tribe, and we are here tonight with Sheila Weller, one of our favorite people.
And you are mine.
Oh, Sheila's written a lot for us, and Sheila's done so much for Next Tribe, elevating us, connecting us to people, writing wonderful stories for us. We couldn't ask for a better supporter than Sheila. And of course, I twisted her elbow to come join us tonight. She's got a lot going on, this woman. But many of you know.
No.
I think
Can everybody put on mute? You're supposed to. Anyway. As you know,
I can't.
Hold on a second. I've got to mute people who are coming in that haven't been muted. There's so many. Hold on. Oh, everybody's muted. Okay, so.
Doug.
We're back. So Sheila is the author, many of you know, of 7 books. Is it 7? It's more than 7.
It's 8 now, I think.
8 now. And Girls Like Us, you see the backdrop. That's one of her.
That's my happy book.
That's your happy book. That's the one.
Yeah.
One of the ones we know best. So so that, and then also the news sorority, Diane Sawyer, Couric, Christiane Amanpour, and the Triumph of Women in TV News. Her most recent book is on Carrie Fisher, and she's also, you've just talked to so many people, even, oh, I didn't even hit go live. Anyway, we'll start over. We'll not start over, but we are here with Sheila Weller. And Sheila, tell us about, so you've written 8 books, and most of them, the recent ones, have been about really iconic women. And so I'd love to hear, I know you have some thoughts on all these iconic women you've written about, like what you've learned from them. And
Sure. You want me to just go on?
Yeah, so yes. And we thank you for being here.
Okay, I was thinking of, I've written about the books about iconic women, lots of articles about them and other things, but I was thinking of somebody who I didn't write a book about, but was the most iconic woman that I've ever interviewed, and I was lucky. She's an extraordinary woman. Her work saved my life when I was a depressed teenager, and when she called me 5 years ago for our interview, she called me at the appointed hour with no assistant. She was so real and so wonderful, and when I told her she saved my life, she sounded really gratified. And she said something really important. I asked her, as you ask people when you interview them, what do we need most in the world like right now, or something like that. And she said, kindness. We need kindness, and we need to be kind toward older people. And I remember thinking that was an unusual thing to say, and it was so meaningful. And I think now, with everything from your motto, aging boldly, to coronavirus, to this incredibly divided nation, and a really horrible president who's dividing us all the more, and the really important, huge importance of Black Lives Matter, which has always been important, but has never been as important and as listened to as it is today. And just the need for unity and the need for kindness. Her words 5 years later really, really resonate with me, and that there's nothing that you would expect less from Aretha Franklin. So thank you, Aretha.
Fabulous.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the women that I did write books about, and I kind of culled a life lesson for each of them. I'll go kind of fast, or if I'm making too much of it. Let's start with Carole King. Another thing we've been talking about lately, and President Obama mentioned it the other night, is how much this era is like the 60s. The late 60s was full of violence, protesters.
I'm muting people. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, violence, protesters, assassinations, a hugely divided country. It was such a painful time. And the vibe was changed, the zeitgeist was changed mainly by one woman who came in. She had been a very accomplished songwriter of really soulful songs, but she moved to Laurel Canyon and she sang with her heart and wrote with her heart, and authenticity that was so needed at the time, produced and recorded an album in 7 days, which is absolutely unbelievable. And the family that did it with her was really like a family. And she became the first woman to produce, to have the most successful album of the decade, and that was Carole King. And she did it by being herself, completely natural. The album was beautiful. The album wasn't beautiful. Anyway, she did it by being herself, and no makeup, no hair straightening, no nose job. She wore the regular clothes that she wore. She didn't give in to any of the looks that you were supposed to have at the time. And so that was her lesson. It was an incredible lesson. Living very near her in Laurel Canyon, but very, very different. And they came out and became famous in the counterculture at the same time, was Joni Mitchell, who had a very different ethos. Her ethos was, when things get easy, make them hard. Go for the difficult. You want to row with the difficult. She did it several times, including turning to jazz, but the time she did it the most importantly was when she wrote Woodstock and Ladies of the Canyon and was madly in love with Graham Nash. And she left that to go live on a funky island in the Mediterranean with someone she called her mean old daddy, Kerry Raditz, a guy who was really a great guy. I got to know him, but he gave her a hard time. And she liked having the hard time in a little hut, in a little cave with no electricity or running water. And from the experience of living a more difficult life than she needed to, and her friend, one of the ladies of the canyon, told me she needed her life to be harder. From that experience, she gestated and came up with the beautiful album, Blue, which was her masterpiece album. So that's Joni's message and life's lesson to me. Carly was head forward. She wrote a beautiful line in her first memoir, Boys in the Trees. If the rules of love are that you can only love if your love is being reciprocated, then whoever made those rules is taking a piece of your authenticity away. And I love that line. When Carly burst on the scene, she had every man she want. She had Chris Christopherson, she had Cat Stevens, she had Jack Nicholson, Warren Beatty, who was a large part of You're So Vain. She had Mick Jagger. Fell in love with James Taylor, who was kind of the counterpart to Carole King in starting that beautiful, authentic folk rock music. They were together for 10 years with 2 kids, and then when they got divorced, he wouldn't talk to her for a while. And she had a wonderful life after that, including an ex-husband who I got to know, and after that, a wonderful partner. But she always had a heart, she always had a piece of her heart for James that stayed there. And when she wrote her memoir, she talked about how important he was, even when he wouldn't talk to her. I said to her, Carly, don't you think was that a little overly brave to put in? I mean, people might think, well, they might be sad for you. And she said, no, I'm really proud of that. So again, that motto, if the rules of love are that you can only love if it's reciprocated, someone is taking a piece of your authenticity away. And I think that's why she wrote such beautiful songs, such soulful, funny, witty songs. She was so true to herself. Okay, moving to my newscaster ladies, we have Diane Sawyer. And the lesson from her is, keep the feeling that you have for someone who is important to you, even if everybody who's important, everybody who's significant has an opposite feeling toward him. We've talked a lot recently about Richard Nixon. We had an impeachment effort for our present president, and sadly and tragically it didn't work out. But Richard Nixon in the early 70s was about to be impeached and left right before he could be impeached. He got on the plane and he did a little salute, went to San Clemente, left the presidency in disgrace to write his memoirs. Diane Sawyer was a chief aide for him. She came to San Clemente with him and she wrote his memoirs, finished his memoirs, was the second to last person to leave. All through her incredible career as a newscaster, as an interviewer, as someone who has really given us the world and given us America, in such a thoughtful way, in such a probing way. She was always told, gee, don't you want to kind of reassess Richard Nixon? Did you really like him that much? He was a pretty awful guy. And that was the politically correct, that was the kind of correct feeling about him. But she never betrayed her actual feeling toward him, which was that he was a good person. She saw qualities in him, which, by the way, Ally McGraw also said she saw. She saw qualities in him that were meaningful and were sweet and would have made it for a good president. So she could so easily have joined the tribe and did the right thing, but she kept her own iconoclastic feelings about him, which I think were a form of authenticity that really helped so much give her interviews and give her work the substance and the humanity that they had. She probes people with that same sense of you are who you are and be proud of it. Okay, Katie Couric. Katie Couric, the cheerleader, the girl next door, Perky Katie, all of that, the little sister. She was always underestimated. She was, people told me, the most ambitious person they had ever met, but she was always underestimated as Perky Katie. Well, she learned to take advantage of it. And the lesson from her that I learned was take advantage of being underestimated. You can use it. And she did it a number of times in a number of ways, but one of the best ones was when she first joined the Today Show and she was co-hosting with Brian Gumbel. She was interviewing Barbara Bush, Mrs. Bush, the First Lady at the White House, about her furniture and her design and her antiques and so forth, and a real girl-on-girl lightweight interview. And so she did it, and then in walks genial patriarch George W. Bush. And he kind of virtually pats her on the head. Oh, Katie, how are you, dear little Katie? You're interviewing Babs, hope everything is good. And Katie was ready for him. She zapped him questions about Iran-Contra, about his new rival, Bill Clinton, and they were really hardcore journalistic questions. He was completely gobsmacked. He wasn't prepared for it. It was such a good interview, such a tough interview that they ran it at the Today Show without commercials. So Katie learned a lesson for that, which she used in other parts of her life, including her tremendous cancer advocacy and work, which is let them underestimate you and you'll get the best of them. So that was Katie. Christiane's lesson to me was, even if they say you're looking and doing and saying everything wrong for what you want to do, don't change for them. All of these things are about personal integrity. Don't change for them because it's going to come in and work for you and maybe work for others and maybe work for a whole country full of others later. Christiane really wanted to be a newscaster on TV, came to CNN in the early 80s, and to be a female newscaster in the South then, you should be blonde, you should be smiling, you should wear primary colors, you should certainly have an American name and voice, all the rest. She was everything that wasn't. She had an authoritative British accent. She had an Iranian last name that was complicated to hear. She had dark hair that was kind of, tousled, didn't wear makeup and didn't smile. But she insisted on being on the air. And at CNN, they said, we love her. She's brilliant and she's, so formidable, but she can't be on the air. She pushed her way through, including doing the Coney Island hot dog eating contest in New York. When the Gulf War started, she had her time and place because she was an internationalist in the way that few other journalists were, half Iranian, half English, half Muslim, half Catholic. And then when Bosnia started in the early 90s, many wonderful journalists were there, risking their lives and sometimes giving their lives in Bosnia. But she was the one who stood in front of the cameras, stood in front of the missiles behind her every night in those dark nights, telling us that this was a genocide in a country we'd almost never heard of. And there she was in her, as a friend said, a ratty peacoat that she wore year after year with her dark hair, with her unsmiling face, with her authoritative English accent, with her Iranian name, telling us about the Bosnian genocide in a way that we wouldn't have learned it from anybody else. We wouldn't have taken it seriously. So what did not work for her in early CNN Atlanta was a gift to us, was a gift to our whole country. And in fact, she bawled Bill Clinton out very early on in her career. He was the president. So she had an authority about that genocide that was important to all of us. So she was herself and she never stopped being herself. Carrie Fisher, many things, a best friend to so many celebrities, so many august people in, not just in, you know, the industry and communications, but in all kinds of arts and literature, and also men and women on the street. Funny, witty, a nonstop worker. She wrote 8 books. She had a one-woman show. She was an actress. She was a script doctor. She was a best friend to so many. People climbed over themselves telling me friend stories. But the most significant thing about her was how honest she was about her life. When she had a weight problem, she was honest about it. Her crazy family of origin, she was honest about it and very funny about it. She was honest about her drug addiction. Few people were as honest as she was. And she was very honest about her bipolar disorder and helped significantly destigmatize it for the rest of us. Other people who had been ashamed to have it, especially women, got the courage to talk about it because she was able to talk about it, say to Diane Sawyer in 1990, I am mentally ill, I can say that. So she did all of that in her last years. And of course she was Princess Leia. In her last years, she was very funny and witty and snarky and giving them hell on Twitter when people put her down. But in the last year of her life, she was really sad about it. She admitted to people that it hurt her feelings. She even cried about it. And she said to Rolling Stone twice in the month before she died, she said, you know what we need more in this world? We need kindness. We need kindness. When I almost rubbed my eyes when I read that, because that wasn't the Carrie that I had been researching. But she had come to a point of being able to come to terms with her own vulnerability, also with taking care of her dying parents. But she understood that we need kindness. So again, from two icons who couldn't be different, who are no longer with us, but must be looking down from some exalted place, Aretha Franklin and Carrie Fisher, both talking about kindness. And I'd say among all the things that we need right now at this incredibly difficult, challenging moment, maybe kindness is one of the main ones.
Wow. Yes, I agree. That's wild that they both said that.
Yes.
And it's so true. I want to just tell everyone, I'm going to ask Sheila a few questions here, but we're open to questions from all of you, and I'm sure you have questions. You can write your questions in the chat, and then when I call on you, I'll unmute you so you can ask Sheila directly. We like it to be more interactive that way. But Sheila, I just love, how your career has developed and what it's become. But I know you started out kind of you wrote a lot of true crime stories, hard-hitting true crime stories. And I just wondered how you made that transition from that to kind of focusing on these wonderful women.
Well, they were kind of, to me, they were feminist stories. I mean, they were not hard-hitting true crimes. They were crimes where wives were murdered or women were raped. They were kind of well-known crimes. And I kind of talked about them sociologically and culturally and focused on the women. The first one was because I knew the woman who was murdered. So that's how I fell into that and then continued. And you just kind of look for stories that matter to you. I mean, Girls Like Us was something as a story that I always wanted to tell. It was about as much about the generation of women as the specific women who embodied it. So that was just one of those, I call it my happy book, was one of those things that, it had been gestating in me for a long time. And it was a very happy hit. It was a success. So after that, first I kind of resisted the idea of doing another 3-woman story, but then it became clear that that would be a good idea. And I thought of women in newscasting because that was a field that, despite the fact that there were so many Ivy Leaguers in it and, coastal liberals, it was a very sexist field. They said things like women would never be an anchor of a 6:30 show, which is like 6:30 shows, what are those anymore? But so I dove into that. And then Carrie Fisher, just when she died, it became very clear how significant she was, which I'd always kind of felt. So that was my next book. But you look for good stories. You look for stories that kind of resonate with the culture, with the society, and you do that. That's what I did.
So all of them had a feminist bent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's calling themselves a feminist now, so we all are, but they were. And the true crimes were not kind of A killed B kind of thing. It was always something where a woman was the victim and there was something wrong with the law. In 2 cases, including the OJ book I did, something was wrong with the law on domestic violence, something was wrong with the law on custody, and so forth.
Well, and that's how, speaking of OJ, that's how we first met, remember? So
We did. You did a great job. When I was out in LA looking for people, you scored a real coup, Jeannie.
you know,
You got Robin, what was her name? Robin,
I forget her last name now.
I know.
But so, and I did read your you had a beautiful memoir about.
Oh, yes, my memoir.
I love
Dancing
that.
Heroes. Yes, that was family.
Yes, but
That meant, yeah.
my question I've never asked you this, but how did you decide on the 3 women for Girls Like Us? Because, you know, in my mind, so many, standout.
Well, I'll bring my sister into the story. That was actually easy. I wanted to do a story about the generation, and I had always thought, I knew that they were the ones to write about. I mean, I knew that their lives resonated with, they did the things we did, they thought the things we thought. When their music came out and we'd listen to them on our 78 record players or hear them on the FM radio station, it was like listening, we got it, you know. They were kind of forging a new kind of womanhood. They were. The rest of us were trying to do it too. And there was just a sense that generational arc was very typified by them. I had Linda Ronstadt in the mix at the beginning, but it was too many people. 4 was too many. And also she's wonderful and she's amazing. And I'd love to write about her, but she didn't write her own songs. I think I wrote about her for Rex Drive.
Yeah, you did.
But I remember walking down the street of our then country house in cold December or January and thinking, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? And I thought of Girls Like Us. That was the title that I had at the time, but I just thought of the 3 of them, Carole, Joni, and Carly, and it just made a tremendous amount of sense. I remember calling my sister and saying, what do you think of that? And she thought it was a great idea. And it took longer to convince my agent and my close friend, but you know.
Say hi, Liz. Liz, I unmuted you. Say hi.
Hi.
I don't know if you remember that phone call.
You played a part in that.
A very small part.
Give you some credit. So have you, what are your tricks then, or what's your method for getting access to the celebrities or to people around them?
It's hellish. It's horrible. And all of us who do this complain to each other. We should have a big drunken party about it. Well, it's gotten bad lately. You write a proposal, you try to get people who like you and respect you and know your, reputation to kind of be people they can talk to if they want to talk. I mean, there are people who really felt that their closeness, even if it was small, even if it was arbitrary and random, with these significant women or people in general, were the most important moment of their life. So those are people that are oddly easy enough to get. A lot of Joni's friends in Canada felt that way. That guy Carrie Raddatz I told you about. When I called him, he called me. I thought it was calling a woman in the phone, but Carrie Raddatz, a psychologist or something. I went to the store, came back. There were 2 messages on my machine, and when I called him back, he said, "I was waiting for someone to find me." I love that story. So sometimes there are people that were just waiting to tell these stories, and then you go through their representatives. One thing leads to another. The Girls Like Us was the luckiest book in that I got people that, from this vantage point now, I wonder, how did I get them? But I did get a lot of people, and some of them sadly died soon after I interviewed them. 2 of Joni's important drummer boyfriends. She had 2 jazz drummer boyfriends in a row, and others. But you just work it, I think anybody who does this knows you just kind of work it.
And the for Girls Like Us, did Carole King? Did you interview all of them? I can't remember.
No. And I never said I would.
Yeah.
I knew that would be hard to do. You couldn't get 3 people to say yes to you. And also, a reason that sounds more like an excuse, but it's actually true, is I thought if I interviewed them, they would think it was their book. I would want to please them. I would get upset if, hi Kim. I would get upset if they didn't like something, so I told the reps that I wasn't looking to do that. That would be A, too ambitious, and B, would have that vulnerability, attendant with it. Early on, Carly called me, left a message on my machine, said, I love this idea. I had contacted one of her best friends, Jake Brackman. She took it on herself to call me, and she let the kept the door open for everybody and said this wonderful thing, a very Carly thing. I expect to have my feelings hurt.
Mm.
Talk to anybody you want, let them say anything they want. And I say hats off to Carly Simon for that.
Wow, that's great. So that have you gotten any?
It's 7 o'clock, so everybody here is going yay for the essential workers, yay.
Have you gotten any blowback from any of your subjects in these books?
Well, I'm not going to talk about the last one.
Yeah, no. I mean, but like, there was something that with the news sorority book.
Yeah, there was something with the news sorority that was weird. Oh boy, they're really doing it tonight. Yay!
Yay!
Yay! Beating pans, you know. It's like there was a quote that Katie gave about Diane when they were rivals at GMA and Today Show, which rivals are rivals. You know, the stakes are high. There was a funky, funny thing that Katie said that was totally tongue-in-cheek. It was absolutely not meant to be literal at all, and anybody listening would know that it was that. And that got blasted. That was the beginning of, what year was that, 2014? That was the beginning of things going viral. Now everything's viral, or not. But then that was just the beginning of things going viral, and it went viral like crazy. And it ended up being, Katie Couric says that Diane Sawyer sleeps with men to get, you know, or, you know, to get interviews. So that was kind of a crazy thing. And Katie's publicist was very upset with me, and then we made up.
Oh,
Clearly, when people read the book, they knew it was, you know, I was very fair to the women. I was very positive about them, while being honest about the competition that they had to have. You have to be in that field, and it's as true now as it was then. You have to be incredibly competitive. You live and breathe it. You have to let go of plans to go, you know, getting on a plane and going into a war zone or a tsunami, and you have to get the story first. So, you know, that was real. That's part of it. And when men do it, it's, you know, it's something we come to expect. When women do it, it's something that was criticized. So that did happen, but we saw it through.
Right, and you're so fair to I think the depth of your reporting is how you come off so fair, because you put things in you have the context for, in all these books, you've really set the context for what their lives were like, and I've always admired about that. You're so careful with that. And
thank you. Yeah, well, you know, context is you know, I do social and cultural context. That's what makes them important. I mean, they're not just people in a vacuum. The worlds that they're in, whether it's their careers or the society, or what their childhoods were like, what their choices in their relationships were like, all that matters. The girls like us had complicated family lives, and one of the things that they did for all of us was prove you didn't have to get married right after college. You could go and be an adventurer in every kind of way. And they had lots of different boyfriends, and they wrote about them. And that was a lot of the beautiful part of their music was about heartbreak and risk and adventure. The new sorority women had much more, you know, conventional or intact families of origin, and married only once perhaps, and married well, didn't have complicated Sturm and Drang filled relationships, because their work was so hard. Their work was the galloping bronco. So I think they needed that security, you know, to ballast them. And I remember thinking there was a big difference there.
right, with it, yeah.
You know, so, but context is important, and being fair is important. And I've had editors who really helped me be fair. Ann Godoff, my editor for the news sorority, was wonderful about stuff. She had a lot of comments, and a lot of them were, you know, she gave reasons, for example, of things that Katie Couric did that were eye-opening to me, and she was a terrific editor. All of my editors have been, but that was, you know, you always take what you can from editors. They really help, and that includes you. And you know, but fairness is important. Fairness is important.
Well, and you know, I've interviewed some celebrities, but at one point I decided I couldn't, because I couldn't do it anymore. I think you have to have a certain makeup to to be able to do it. First of all, I get nervous, but also I just, there's so much trouble. There's so many, like you say, there's a publicist, there's a manager, there's this, there's that. There's so many people running blocker, linebacker on these people. And it makes me crazy. But what is it what's your skill or what set that makes you be able to do this so well, do you think?
Well, I don't think of them as celebrities. I mean, these are people that did something that, I mean, maybe I'm kidding myself. I mean, I think that the singer-songwriters as, iconic storytellers and women in our culture who lived with us changing a culture. The newswomen, is bigger than being celebrities. When you do celebrity interviews, as you very well know, Jeannie, it's for a magazine and they set the whole thing up. And I haven't done that in a while, but that's, except the things that I did for you. But those are very monitored and set up by magazines, a dying breed magazines. But anyway, yeah. But the books were different. But you're lucky when you have somebody who really wants to talk to you. And again, I talked to the people who knew them. I talked to the people who knew them throughout their lives, from childhood best friends to boyfriends and lovers, to sound musicians, to record producers, to neighbors. So those weren't, I didn't have to go through the celebrity song and dance for that. That's kind of the way I do my books. And I did the true crime books that way too. I told the story through the friends. I mean, I interviewed more of OJ and Nicole's friends than almost anybody else did, because I wanted to write about the marriage itself and what happened to it, and how domestic violence can infiltrate even a happy marriage that everybody, kind of hangs on to. So I didn't do the trial. So you find the people around the people you want to write about, and you get their insight. That's kind of the way I do it.
We have a question from Fran Carpentier, and I'm going to unmute you, Fran. It takes me forever to. There is a trick to this.
I just unmuted myself. I think I did it. First of all, Sheila, I'm a really big fan, and you are just a wonderful speaker, so honest.
Thank you.
Really. So I'm just wondering, is there still like a book inside you, a book that you hope to write, that you're dying to write?
I'm not sure. Check with me in a couple of months.
Okay.
It's hard finding books sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So much is going on now. It kind of, any book you thought of, before all this stuff started, is like, little next to what's going on now. So
exactly.
I think we're all kind of dealing with the new world we're in.
Yeah.
And if you thought of, I mean, maybe pre-pandemic, but some of the, like if you were going to do a Girls Like Us of this generation, of this young generation of musicians, or is there anybody that you kind of?
No, I haven't thought of another music book. Women of character, women who, accomplished a lot, women who lived by their character, that's, appealed to me. We did a piece, remember, for Next Time on depression in women, that's kind of appealed to me, but it'll come.
It'll come, yes. And I'm looking for Janice Idas. Can you unmute yourself? Because you have a question. I can't find you. Oh, there you are. There. You have a question.
Here. Hi. So, Sheila, this is so inspiring, and thanks to you. Yes, I'm really.
And I can't believe I forgot the album Tapestry. I mentioned Tapestry, and then I said, wait a minute, Beautiful wasn't Carole King's first album. Of course, it was Tapestry. Hello, everybody.
Well, now we're in a tapestry, right? We're on Zoom Tapestry.
Yes, we are.
So my question for you, Sheila, and you answered it a little bit, so I'm going to rephrase it, which is, in addition to feminism, I also see a theme of humanism, the sort of connective tissue among all of us on this planet, in your work. And my question was going to be, are you currently working on something that explores those two themes? If you agree that human connection is also part of what you're doing, but knowing what we're going through now, I'm wondering if you're thinking of your next project, or, just what you're envisioning for your future now.
again. I'll talk to you in a few months. I did something recently that meant a lot to me about polio for airmail. That was personal, and that was, I wanted to tell a story about people that I admired. So I'll put it that way. Sometimes smaller things are things that matter to you a lot. The interview with Aretha mattered a lot. Other things I've done. I recently pulled up a long piece I did on Emmett Till, because there were 3 movies that were going to be made about 3 years ago. And of course, one, knowing the movie business, the very little that I know, it's just going through its like 4th round of writers. But I did meaningful pieces on stuff that was happening in the South, in Mississippi, a friendship between the daughter of real racists and the daughter of a victim. That won a bunch of awards. The piece on Emmett Till that I pulled out and like did pieces of it in Facebook, because that obviously at this moment means a lot. I'm trying to do something else, fingers crossed, about this moment now with people who are important speakers about it. But it's a moment, I don't know, like everybody else, I think I'm watching more than anything else. I'm watching with my mouth open and seeing what's happening every night. And I'm just astonished that we have 2 things going on at once. I mean, nothing was bigger than the pandemic to me, and really nothing is bigger and more consequential. And I think it'll be with us for a long time. But now this incredibly important racial awareness, which we had before, but not like this. This is, a second enormous thing. And it's living through a period where you just, I think, listen and watch and watch what's going to happen. I think a lot of us, of course, are tuned into what's going to happen in November, which is very important.
Yes. And I just put a link in there with to the polio story in the chat. If you haven't seen it, it's wonderful, and it creates this whole scene of what life was like during that time. And your research is amazing. And I was interested that, I guess I didn't realize, even though I've read the book, I forgot that Joni Mitchell was a survivor.
Right. Yes.
So that was interesting to hear. Maxine has a question. Where are you, Maxine? Can you unmute yourself? So I can't find you.
Did
Okay,
I?
there you go.
Okay.
Hi, Maxine.
Hi. I'm not sure if anybody knows this, but if you've read her memoir, your mother was a form of a journalist. What do you think she'd think of your work? And what do you think the legacy of what she did was for you?
Oh, she was amazing. She was a character. She was, one of a kind. All our mothers were one of a kind. Did you ever meet her? You didn't, did you? No. Like some of our mutual friends did, but anyway. Yeah. What would she think of my work? I mean, she always worried about me. She always worried about me being a freelance writer, but she was proud of me. She died right before I was trying very hard to get a book that I didn't get, but it was about like 5 or 6 sisters of a sister that had been murdered by a district attorney in Georgia. And I went 3 times to the trial in Birmingham, and he got a death sentence, and he was swiftly killed. Wow. But that didn't materialize. But then the OJ thing happened, and she would have looked at a lot of this, including what's going on right now, including even before the pandemic. She would have looked at Trump, with disbelief. So I think what she would have looked at the whole world. She would have looked at all our kids, Liz's and my kids, with incredible pride. So it's not just the work; it's like everything.
Yeah.
She was a character.
Yeah. Wish I had met her.
And
yes, that would have been fun. That would have been great.
Sheila, can you just tell us a little bit about what kind of writing she did?
She started out being a journalist at different newspapers. She had a shopping column at a Brooklyn paper. I had to find the paper in the bowels of the 42nd Street Library. It was harder writing about unfamous people than famous people. You really had to dig. Oh. And then she was a journalist at the Boston American, then became a movie magazine writer and editor, and did that for a long time. Our house was full of kind of young stars and publicists and hangers-on and all these kinds of funny people who were good in their hearts and were like always trying to sell a tip or get something going, and they were friends of hers. And then she became a National Enquirer writer for the last, I don't know, 15 years of her life, 20 years of her life. So she never stopped. She was a character.
Wow.
Jim met her, Maxine.
And I wonder too, you grew up in Beverly Hills, and as you wrote in your memoir, dancing was at Ciro's. Am I saying that right? Ciro's?
Dancing at Ciro's, yeah.
And so does that help? Because I think one of my questions was, has anybody made you nervous to interview? And maybe
somebody, that's interesting. Somebody else asked me that question at the Savannah Book Festival. They said, I came from a small town, you came from Beverly Hills, it must be an advantage to you. It isn't. I don't think it is really. But people do make you nervous. I can't think of specifically, but whether they're eminences in one form or another, I did tons of magazine stuff, including stories about women that went through a lot of things and they weren't necessarily famous. So one of the hardest batches of people I got to say yes to talk to me were the original diggers from the Summer of Love. I did a big piece of the Summer of Love for Vanity Fair, and getting them to talk in 2011, like they had come into being in 66, 67, getting them to talk in 2011 was like getting the weathermen to talk, like right after they set the bombs. I can't tell you how complicated this was. And they were completely unimpressed or pretended to be unimpressed with Vanity Fair. So you never know what you have to fight for. And sometimes you do.
But you finally got them, right?
I got them through a great guy named Isaac Hernandez, who I'm Facebook friends with. We regale that once in a while. I forgot how that happened, but I finally got them, yeah.
And because it's so appropriate right now, tell us about the Emmett Till story that you did. Who did you do that for?
That was for Vanity Fair. It ended up being two shorter stories, a piece online and a piece in the magazine. But I did a big thing on it. There were 3 movies being made at the time, all by good people. And in fact, I asked one of the authors of the best book, his name is Deborah Anderson. It's I forget, The Life and Times of Emmett Till, but it's really, if you want to read the story, that is the best one. I asked him on Facebook what's going on with the movie, and he said they hired their next 4 writers. So these things take time, as people in the industry who've helped me, who are on this call know. But it would be, it's a story to be told right now. It's an incredible story.
And so what you're saying is that you've recently checked with him, and there's no real.
There were 3 things that were going to be made, and they were all almost equally full of good people. Nothing was a runaway good. They all had good people, as they say, attached to them. And I just asked him, and he said they're still writing it. So nothing has come out yet.
I bet
that was going on at the end of 2016. So.
I bet this will spur them on.
Oh, of course it will spur them on. Yeah, really.
And
just imagine
Art Brodsky, can you unmute yourself? You had a question.
I do.
Yeah.
So I'm in DC, so I take this, through a maybe different lens. There's so many fascinating women in politics these days. From the squad, quote unquote, the squad,
yeah.
to Elizabeth Warren, to Val Demings. You could just name many of them, and I'm just sort of curious which of them attract you as possibly a story you'd want to tell.
Well, there's so many good journalists who got that beat. Oops.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. I'd rather answer the question of who I think would be a great vice president. I think Val Demings would. I think Lori Lightfoot would. I know a lot of people don't like her. I think she's good. Kamala Harris would. But there are definitely a lot of women in Washington. You're absolutely right, Art. And I think they're probably busy writing their own books right now.
But I can imagine somebody, and we'd love it to be you doing something on the squad, or just a group of women that have just made such impact on our lives. So anyway, we'll wait to see. So I'm also curious because I know you did a story for us about Carly Simon, and you
And her daughter.
and her daughter, yes. And
Yeah.
you had your conversation, and it was so light and friendly. And I was like, wow, you know, have you become friends with some of these women you've interviewed?
She's somebody I was friends with in about 5 years after, for about the first 5 years after I wrote the book. In fact, when she was writing her book, she sent me early drafts of it. Then it went into what she wrote her own, and I did a Q&A with her at Barnes & Noble. She's wonderfully neurotic, and she would say that she is, and she has stage fright, so she wanted somebody she knew to do the Q&A with her. Then she did her own memoir, was a big hit, and the second one was too. So we lost a little bit of touch, but I wrote her recently, wanted to know how she was, and you know, we were back in touch. I did want to write about her. She was going to be honored at not Lincoln Center, Carnegie Hall, and deserved to be honored in a way that only guys were from this group that was doing the honoring. The guy who owned City Winery was doing this, but unfortunately the pandemic stanched that or put it on indefinite hold. But I wanted to write about it for that. For some reason, she didn't want to do it. But then right after that was all over, I wrote to her and she wrote me back. So you never can tell with these people. You got to be ready for anything.
So, but you keep contact with a lot of your subjects.
Less than one would think. I mean, because so many people I interview are friends of or associates of. Those are the ones. And yes, I'm Facebook friends with a lot of them.
And you definitely have made a great contact and great connection for Next Tribe by putting us in touch with Judy Collins, who...
Judy is a friend. She really is a friend. She's wonderful.
And that's why I think I wrote my little note to you. It was like, was she ever in the mix of your book? I mean, I know she's in the book, but was she...
She's in the book, and it's funny because I called her and she wouldn't talk to me for the book. And then she regretted it. She loved the book so much, but Judy's terrific. I mean, I wanted to do the three women who were like a year apart in age, and Judy is all over the place. I mean, Judy is incredibly significant, and she's a friend I made later, and we are friends. She's terrific. She's got something out now. She's doing Amazing Grace with a choir, very important choir, with the proceeds going to the World Health Organization. And she never stops. As you know, she never stops.
Yeah, yeah. So the women, I guess you've already said this, the women of the Girls Like Us really helped us helped a generation see you don't have to get married, there's some freedom. But what, like, collectively, what are some of the things that these women in all these books have in common, do you think?
Well, I think it's the things that I said earlier, which are different versions of integrity, believe in yourself, stay true to yourself, whether it's Carole King not getting a nose job. Look at the picture of her behind you. I mean, she's just a natural woman. I mean, she's just, you wouldn't think she was, a star in the way that you were supposed to be a star back then. Carly's sense of, I'm going to talk about somebody I love even if he doesn't talk to me anymore. Christiane Amanpour's sense of staying exactly the way she looked and dressed and didn't smile and all of that, even though she wanted to do something that called for the very opposite kinds of characteristics. So I think, different kinds of integrity and an ability to use that to get what you, I don't want to say get what you want, but get what you deserve because your talent merits it. So that's, a lot of that. I mean, to be a communicator, whether as a singer-songwriter or a newscaster, people have to believe you. People have to believe you're real. My husband said, we were watching Wolf Blitzer in our endless watching of all these TV shows, and he's been on forever. And John said the other night, several nights, said, I really like Wolf Blitzer. I really like Wolf Blitzer. I said, yeah, no, I know. I've always liked him too. And I said, what I learned from the news sorority is you can't do this successfully. And I think Megyn Kelly's an example. She had to leave. You can't do this really successfully for a long time unless you could really somehow can communicate with with your audience. There's got to be a heart-to-heart thing. So whether it's writing a song that makes somebody say, that song speaks for me. I'm going to sing it when I'm blue because it absolutely tells my story. Or whether it's somebody interviewing a head of state or a movie star or a person who escaped a horrible fate, and getting that story out in a very rich, evocative human terms. You have to be able to relate in a very deep way. And to do that, I think you have to trust yourself and take risks in your own life that involve integrity.
Right.
Yeah.
And I do.
It sounds a little goody-goody, but it's true. And then you have to be very sharp-witted as well. You have to know how to, utilize people. I don't want to say use people, but utilize the people that come your way, and look for opportunities, look for openings. Now, of course, for the last 20 years, we've been using the term brand yourself. Back then, it was with the singer-songwriters, they branded themselves without thinking about it. They did not have stylists. They did not have, the publicists were a different thing. They weren't like publicists are now. They weren't armed with an armada of people who told them what to do, say, wear, shop. They didn't go on red carpets and say who they were wearing. It was a whole different world. They weren't even child, aside Joni was a tiny bit, they weren't even child singers. They just came up on their own, played their guitar or piano in their bedroom. In the case of Carole, became a pro very early because she was incredibly talented and ambitious. But they did it on their own. That who they were, their image was their own. And I think that was a lot of their integrity as well.
Right. And none of them, I don't think had they didn't have stage mothers or any, it wasn't that kind of thing.
Not really, no. They had, Carly had a great manager in Arlene Rothberg. They had mentors. Listen, Joni had David Crosby. Joni produced her own first album. A woman never produced her own album then. An unknown woman never produced her own album. She had a pretend male producer that she used his name so she could get it produced, but she did it herself. So they had help. They had people who fell madly in love with their work and fell madly in love with them and gave them record contracts and stuff like that. But they did it on their own in a way, and their image was their own. What they sang and how they looked and what they resonated, that came from them. Nobody told them to do that.
And I think that's what you talked about integrity, but also that authenticity, it's
authenticity, yeah.
Respond to that.
Not that people aren't now. I think a lot of them are now, but it's just a different world. It's a much more cosseted world. Right. And of course, they're more authentic in ways that they weren't back then. Nobody had Twitter. Nobody had Instagram. People didn't take pictures. These women did not take pictures of themselves the way they do now. It's very different. So because of authenticity.
Yes, I think that's key. And since we're running out of time, I'll just ask Maxine's other question, and I had this in my mind to ask as well. But any hope for a TV series based on girls like that?
No. My sister knows the long story. We worked it. We tried. People did try. There was effort made. There was a script written. It was going to be Taylor Swift very much wanted to play Joni years ago. It's hard doing things with real people. I would love that. That would be great. I don't think it's going to happen, but that would be nice.
Joanne Klein says, I'm just reading this because of the time we're about out. The epic series Laurel Canyon touches on Joni producing her album.
There's another Laurel Canyon documentary, which surprised me. There was one about 6 months ago, Echoes of the Canyon with Jacob Dylan. And there was one, I think, before that. And there were several books on Laurel Canyon. I was surprised. And I know that one of the guys that's involved in this one, Harvey Kubernick, who is a big guy in that world, in that particular geographical world, and that, time span. But there's another Laurel Canyon documentary.
It's great.
Well, yes, we're going to have to, it's epics. I see, it's epics. Yeah. So we will have to look at that and try to experience that world again, or we can just reread your book and get that feeling.
Okay, Tim?
Yeah, Tim.
Okay, great.
Oh.
Hi, I just want to say goodbye.
John wants to say goodbye to his nephew.
Oh, so yes, we get to see John Kelly too. This is a special bonus.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There he is, okay.
Hello. That's
Hi.
Sheila's
Hi.
husband, John Kelly, author, a
Okay.
noted author of his own.
History books, yeah.
Yes, is
Tim Malloy.
Tim Malloy there?
He's still there.
Yes, I am.
We can hang on after everybody else.
We'll do that later. We'll do that later.
Oh, okay, yeah, do it.
That's so good. That's what I love about Zoom. Right?
Yeah,
Get the whole thing. So thank you so much, Sheila, and thanks for your time and all that you put
Well,
in.
you know, I'll always do things for you, Jeannie. We have to have another Cafe Clooney gossip.
I know we will when the world is right.
You know, when the world is back, yeah, we'll do that. We'll have a couple of glasses of wine.
So
And I love these series. This series of author talks are great. I want to do the coffee talk too. I want to do the
Yes.
some of the other things. Your whole series is terrific.
Yeah, we have the Sunday Salon also where we talk about personal development, and that's been great. We had Karen Carbo on last week, so.
Oh, Karen's great. I blurbed her book.
Yes, you did. That's right.
Yes.
You did. So anyway, I want to thank everyone. It was a great talk and learned so much. And we want to, if you haven't read her books, go out and Girls Like Us, the news.
Go on Amazon. Yep. Carrie Fisher.
Carrie Fisher. There's so many, and also see many of her stories in Next Tribe too.
Yes. And I see you did the Carole one today.
I did.
Yes,
I reran one on Carole King because she was trying to unify and what that's
yes,
message.
very important. Yes.
So, thank you to everyone. Thank you, Sheila, and we'll hope to see everyone at another event.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye. Who's this?
Bye.